This video will not be the first time I have actually mentioned Shmorky in one of my videos, and that is because I've already covered somebody very close to Shmorky, with this being Lowtax, the creator of Something Awful. Whilst this was only a limited mention of Shmorky in that video, it was a pretty conclusive point on who Shmorky was. Although whilst this brief intersection in that video was correct, it was, well, brief and doesn't get near enough to how crazy Shmorky is. Although if you have seen my Lowtax video, you may understand that these people in particular, as well as many people on Something Awful I'm sure, are very very strange and have a wealth of peculiarities that are disgusting yet somewhat funny and interesting. Now, something I have to preface the actual contents of this video with, despite this only being the introduction to this video, is that there is a lot of content within this video that should be taken with a heavy grain of salt. Many of the people involved in Shmorky's life and have given stories and information about him are unreliable narrators to say the least, and this is obvious if you have seen my Lowtax video, which covered him in a lot of detail and showed the kind of things that he had done. However, I will talk about this further when I get to them later on in this video. But that's enough of that. Let's get into who Shmorky is and what makes him a notable person. Shmorky is an artist and animator, likely known for his work and time on the website Something Awful, created by Richard Lowtax Kyanka. The website's success in the 2000s then obviously brought success to him. However, that is just what is most well known about him. Shmorky has actually been quite a successful person, being well known since around 2000 in many different places, although this is under many different monikers and the reasons for this success being highly questionable at best. So let's try and start as close to the beginning as we can with Shmorky's online presence. Shmorky first rose to any sort of prominence in 2000 with the creation and development of his webcomic, Living in Greytown, a humorous comic about a city that is essentially a prison, similar to hell. This is important for two reasons, as it gave Shmorky a little bit of a following, and the fact that these comics included anthropomorphic animal characters, something that we'll get onto a bit more in detail later in the video. Despite the popularity of this comic, Shmorky has hidden essentially all signs of it, with the website originally hosting it simply stating "this comic is dead," and the Internet Archive has been excluded from hosting archives of the website in the past. Other creations around this time include Purple Pussy, a webcomic for girls featuring adult content, and Smut, a purely pornographic webcomic which he released under the pseudonym Cave Deli, which is essentially just his real name, Dave Kelly, with the D and the K sound being swapped. This popularity was not a coincidence, with many people finding him funny, with his future fiancée and his future employer Lowtax talking about how funny he was, and why this made him such a likeable person to them, as well as followers of the webcomics he would produce. However, the seeds of strangeness at this point were already well sown. A more minuscule example of one of his peculiarities is with his actual online username itself, Shmorky, revealing that this name actually originated from an animator from decades ago by the name of Shmorky. This story, in itself, is incredibly stupid, as Shmorky is obviously not a name, and this is not a real person. However, for some reason, the story grew even stupider as this continued with him stating he was being stalked by Shmorky. Somehow, people believed the story. However, Shmorky revealed this was fake, not that for most people that would be necessary. More things about Shmorky that were strange was something related to what I had spoken about earlier with the pseudonym Cave Deli. Whilst I had spoken about the pornographic material he had written and drawn, this is just a tip of the iceberg, as under this pseudonym, as well as with another one by the name of Dave Bunny, Shmorky hosted an okaki board, which is essentially just an art board where he'd host cub and diaper fur art. Despite all of this, his use of pseudonyms made it so it wasn't easily linked that Shmorky was the same person as both Dave Bunny and Cave Deli. As I stated before, Shmorky was undoubtedly a successful person, and this allowed him to be hired by Lotax onto Something Awful, where he would run a section of it known as the Flash Tub, where his animations would be hosted. He would have many well-known members of Something Awful, including Lotax, collaborate on these animations, although these would mainly be through voiceovers. Even collaborating with well-known and well-respected person who was literally everywhere on the internet, Neil, can't pronounce his name, on one of his Lemon Demon songs back in 2003. This isn't even the most he's done, working on multiple different real shows such as Mega 64 and Xavier Renegade Angel, as well as creating shorts on Adult Swim. During Shmorky's time on Something Awful, he was well appreciated and acted like a regular goon, the name given to the dedicated members of Something Awful. There are two things of real substance to bring up during his time. The first of these being that during the early days of Something Awful, there was a staunch hatred of furries on the site, which was somewhat enforced by the community itself. As a result of this, furries who did frequent the site had to be inconspicuous and not mention this, with one of these being Shmorky himself, who, attempting to fit in better, followed along with the general notion of hatred towards furries. This became a much bigger deal when there was a ban wave against furries. However, Shmorky was left out of this ban wave, despite people at this point having a strong belief and some evidence that he was a furry. Shmorky was an avid member of Fuck You and Die, abbreviated to FYAD, a section of Something Awful dedicated to trolling. Now, the next part of this is a lot of allegations, and whilst the situation happened, Shmorky's true involvement is unknown. The users of FYAD vandalised articles, which a Wikipedia editor attempted to stop. They then began trolling the editor, getting him banned off of Wikipedia, which seemingly was a big reason towards this Wikipedia user's suicide. As I stated a couple moments prior, whilst there is evidence to this happening, Shmorky's involvement isn't clear, so it remains an allegation. What really matters about this allegation though, is how it affects Shmorky's character, which we will see later on. By now, it should be very clear to you that Shmorky was a well-respected member of his communities and on the internet, with people enjoying his content and just his presence, and this was furthered with Lotax's YouTube channel Gaming Garbage in 2013, where the two of them would do Let's Plays together of subpar games, which was very successful with fans as well as Lotax. However, this was the beginning of what seemed to be Shmorky's downfall. According to both his future fiancée and Lotax, he had began looking more at Tumblr around this time, causing a large personality shift. This had a massive effect in numerous different ways, with him using the name Daisy K instead of Dave Kelly, as well as his comics taking a drastic turn, with his comedy no longer really being utilised and instead made comics that attempted to make people sympathetic towards him. One of the main topics covered in these comics was a period in his life in 2000 to 2001 where he lived with somebody in Philadelphia. During this time, he was unemployed and was thus earning little to no money. However, despite this, he refused to get a job. The thing about living in an apartment is that you have to pay to live in it. So, what do you do when you can't pay? Shmorky worked out a deal with his roommate where the roommate would allow Shmorky to continue living with him as long as he performed some mouth love on him. Shmorky consistently presented this as grape, despite Shmorky not actually attempting to get a job, not leaving despite his family being welcoming, and the fact that he accepted this deal in itself. This would become a point of laughter for many of the people who began to side against Shmorky and would begin to mock and laugh at him. This was furthered by the fact that these comics typically feature his own original characters called Clurfs, characters that are based off of the Smurfs that are clearly supposed to be cutish, childish characters, so the use of these when he's trying to discuss a serious matter about grape shows his level of unawareness. However, this was only the start of the drastic changes that Shmorky would begin to undertake within their life and would begin messing with his gender identity, something I briefly mentioned a minute ago, changing his name to Daisy K. However, this is not quite what you think, with Shmorky transitioning to a transhumanist, believing Elon Musk would create a machine that would let you change your gender at will, with his ultimate goal being that he wanted to become a clerf. To add on to this clerfification of themselves, they would begin wearing yarn wigs, wearing makeup, and wearing turtlenecks, which would keep them young and looking like a clerf. However, what would really put a negative light onto Shmorky was a couple years later, roughly around 2016. At this point, Shmorky had got a girlfriend who he then got engaged to, although things weren't quite as peachy as they seemed. This showed itself in the form of an audio recording taken from Shmorky of him and his fiancée, with her having a literal psychotic break.
Please don't touch me again, please.
I won't. I'll never touch you again, okay? I'll never touch you again. I'll just do what you want. What do you want me to do? I'll do whatever you want. What do you want from me?
Stop screaming and pretending.
I'm not pretending!
With this audio's release, mocking of Shmorky increased dramatically, both with the ridiculousness of what was said by his fiancée, as well as his voice that now at this point had changed so much that he now sounded like an Elmo Mickey Mouse on helium, with him obviously being very at fault for recording his fiancée without her consent while she was having an actual psychotic issue and trying to present himself as though he was in the right. This is just the start of it, with Lotax then firing him from something awful soon after, as well as gaming garbage, with Shmorky's reasoning being that Lotax was just being a drunken idiot. However, whilst this sentiment was partly true, Lotax would upload a video to his gaming garbage channel and would give his reasonings in a 45-second video.
No, yeah, use mom. Use mom to show you the way.
Yeah, I'm dual wielding mom and a gun.
Yeah, but mom's not on. You gotta turn mom on.
Oh, how do I
Turn mom on in the park.
How do I turn mom on in the park?
Click a button, right mouse button. There you go.
Oh, there we go.
Shmorky just turned mom on in the park. That's a little puzzle.
Yeah.
It's just Shmorky Plays.
All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is just Shmorky again today, and today we play Clumsy Rex for PC Game Engine 2014. The story is that you need to grab some flowers because your anniversary gift is going to be late.
Even with all of this that had come out against Shmorky, he was still seen to many as a positive figure, leading to Lotax having to defend himself, specifically on Twitter, where he'd talk about his dislike for Shmorky's fiancée and how she was mentally ill. But more importantly, he spoke about how Shmorky had affected his fiancée, allegedly stopping her from taking the medication she had needed for her mental issues, as well as now living back with his parents in a trailer. Further to this, Lotax would soon appear in the Kiwi Farms to talk about Shmorky there, where he would reveal more, such as Shmorky's fiancée's text to him. "I've given everything. I'm sorry he got this bad. I just want to be as far away from him as I possibly can. I just want him to stop recording me and stealing my things to prevent me from leaving." His time on Kiwi Farms is short, with him repeating how annoyed Shmorky's fiancée made him, as well as constantly mentioning his children and how he was taking care of them, which came as a result of people berating him for leaving his children with Shmorky alone due to the artwork he had previously drawn and some of the fetishes people had learned he had. This was furthered when more information came out about Shmorky and Lotax's children, when it was stated that Shmorky was seemingly obsessed with Lotax's children, calling them very creative and sweet. However, when pushed on this, Lotax completely denied this and said this never happened, and as I stated before, both in this and my video on him, shows he is not too trustworthy of a person. Soon after, in October 2016, Shmorky's ex-fiancée Amanda went onto Kiwi Farms too and began giving any information she could about Shmorky, with the things that he did to her and what she personally had to deal with. However, I do have to preface this by saying that Amanda does suffer from mental illness as well as being a biased source. However, what she has stated does seem to line up with what Lotax has also stated about Shmorky, as well as what we just know about him in general. But just keep this in mind. Obviously, Amanda being present in the thread generated a lot of attention, with many questions being asked about her and Shmorky's relationship, mainly concerned on what happened in their relationship, as well as Shmorky's fetishes. Shmorky demanded he and his fiancée move to Spokane, further increasing the degeneracy in Lucas Werner's territory. The problem with this is that Spokane has a drug problem, and his fiancée requires medication due to her mental disorders. This led to her having issues when her medication eventually ran out and she struggled to get more, which affected her for a long time. The worst time this occurred was towards the end of their relationship, when Shmorky, who was randomly extremely paranoid, saw his fiancée on her laptop and assumed she was talking about him, and so thus threw her laptop at the wall and called the police on her, which resulted in her getting arrested. This isn't the only time that Shmorky's paranoia peeped its head, with Shmorky never allowing Amanda near his own laptop, being extremely watchful of her. Even more ridiculous was the fact that Shmorky would lie about his age, but not even by a lot, only lying about his age by 2 years, as if that made a difference when he's in his mid to late 30s. Other minor things that occurred, well, slightly minor, was occasionally robbing her and making her do all the cleaning in their apartment, which was furthered by the fact he used a lot of toilet paper for numerous reasons, which, again, just strange. Shmorky would also use Amanda to pretend to be him during videos he would create, due to her having a small and feminine figure, something Shmorky likes to try and present themselves as. However, the worst thing Amanda accused Shmorky of doing was that he at one point slammed a door on her while she had a coffee in her hand, which then scolded her. Instead of apologising for doing this, he instead berated her for not looking where she was going, despite supposedly slamming the door on her. Now, let's get on to the even weirder things that occurred during their relationship. During their time together, Amanda has stated numerous times the peculiarity of Shmorky having sex. When my dog was a small puppy, it fell down the stairs. That sound is exactly what having sex with Shmorky felt like, all in that voice. I mean it when I say he never used a different voice. This, however, is absolutely dwarfed by the other things that Shmorky used to do, with one story involving Shmorky acting like a child and pissing himself right in front of her and giggling. This wouldn't even be the first time he'd do this, with him wanting to roleplay as a child often, although Amanda apparently wasn't having any of it. The final thing, which is nowhere near as bad as what I've mentioned, but still completely absurd, is Shmorky's affinity for poop, requesting that his ex-girlfriends poop for him, which he kept in nappies, with him making them take pills that would get rid of the smell because he hated the smell so much. This was strictly down to poop and would not want the nappies to have pee in whatsoever. What would really change people's opinion entirely of Shmorky was towards the end of 2016, when his chat logs from around 2014 were leaked by the recipient of them, who at this point of the conversation was 16 years old, a fact which he was fully aware of. These chat logs are truly awful, with Shmorky doing erotic roleplay with this person who at some points in the conversation can be seen not wanting to play along with the roleplay, but is forced along anyway by Shmorky. These conversations again included his usual fetishes, where he would bring up children often, but it is pretty much more of the same disgusting things I've already brought up about Shmorky, with not much new information coming out about him. With this occurring, the Shmorky character essentially died, with David backing away publicly from the internet. Probably somewhat obviously, Shmorky has not backed away fully from the internet. People on Kiwi Farms found out about an artist on a website going by the name of Anne, and realised that the artist's style suspiciously matched up with Shmorky's, as well as the strange fetishes of nappies, furries and urination. Whilst not having definitive evidence, with it only being a reasonably strong suspicion, it was pretty much confirmed that this user was actually Shmorky when this user deleted everything on the account, attempting to hide all the things that tied Anne to Shmorky. However, as I just previously stated, this confirmed that this user was actually Shmorky, as well as showing that Shmorky was aware of the Kiwi Farm thread and either looked through it themselves or had somebody else giving them information about it. Since this, thankfully very little has occurred with Shmorky. People have believed that Stone Toss, the notorious comic strip creator, was Shmorky using a new name due to the very similar art style that is shared between Clurse and Stone Toss's style of characters, which, since this comparison, Stone Toss has now dubbed as Krulfs. It is highly unlikely that these two people are the same, due to the large difference in politics, with it being very clear that Shmorky is left-wing and Stone Toss is right-wing, with Shmorky not taking his political orientation lightly. This is the end of Shmorky's story. It appears, at the very least, that he's hidden himself away relatively successfully. He no longer has the platform that he once had, and the majority of people now know of him as the awful person that he is. Just like Lotax, he is an abuser, which is clear in the audio log if you wish to listen to it in full, although this is still clear with Amanda's return to the Kiwi Farms recently, with her problem being highlighted, which we now know is similar to how she would have been with Shmorky, and was still forced to care for him because he cannot be bothered as he never has. Like I said, he no longer has this platform and hopefully will not be able to do these things again. Not with people like Amanda or those who are underaged, but those who have dealt with Shmorky in the past have to move on as best as possible. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. As usual, my Twitter and second channel are down in the description. I stream every Friday at 11 PM GMT, and I hope to see you in the next video.